Last week I began what I'm calling a series on responding to the divine call. Responding to the divine call and looking specifically at the characters in the nativity story, the Christmas story, as kind of a map, a blueprint of our own spiritual journey and our journey of awakening. In Unity, as I've said before, we don't take the Bible as the literal, inerrant word of God. We look at the Bible symbolically, we look at it mystically, we look at it metaphysically. And in doing so, we can learn something about our own soul's journey and unfoldment. We can see elements of our struggles, elements of our successes, and guidelines and pointers along the way that can be incredibly helpful to us. And I think this is absolutely true in taking a look at the mysticism and the metaphysics of the Christmas story. It's a birth story, right? And it's wrapped in a lot of magic and mystery and symbology, but it's a birth story. And in many ways, a birth story very much is akin to our own spiritual unfolding and awakening, right? When we grow spiritually, it is as if we are being, to borrow a more Christianized term, as if we are being born again or born anew, that there is something different about us. And as we look at this Christmas story, we can see elements of ourselves in it, and we can be encouraged in the process. In the story of the shepherds, and I'll read it to you from the book of the Gospel of Luke in just a moment. It's the only place where the shepherds show up, is in the Gospel of Luke. But in it, we are given kind of this invitation to look at what guides us in our lives. Is it faith or is it fear? What guides us? What pulls us? What pulls you in your life? When I was thinking about this yesterday, and of course, I look at my notes throughout the week, but I was thinking in particular yesterday how when I think of fear as something I'm moving away from. If I'm afraid of something, I'm usually moving away from it. And when I think of faith, I am moving toward something. I'm feeling pulled in a direction upward and onward. Faith and fear, I think, are elements that we experience, choice points we experience at any time in our lives when we're faced with something new, something different, an opportunity or a challenge, right? Faced with an opportunity, faced with a challenge, faced with a decision. Fear or faith? What is it that we're listening to believe that those of us committed to the practices and principles and teachings of unity, that we're going to be propelled by faith? It's not that we deny when we might be feeling fear. It's just what we choose to give the greatest power to, what we choose to really motivate us. So words in the Christmas story. So here's how it goes. There were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. And this will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and peace on earth on whom God's favor rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. A beautiful poetic story, right? Imagery. But what are the elements in it that have meaning to us mystically? We don't know for a fact that it happened at all like that. And yet the writers of the gospel, or the writer of the gospel, Luke, felt compelled to present at least this part of the Christmas story in this way, wrapped with these symbols. So if we were to unwrap these symbols for ourselves, to help ourselves to unfold and to grow wiser and more aware and awake spiritually, what might be going on here? There are certain words that jump out to me in this description, words like keeping watch over their flock at night. Keeping watch over their flock at night. That they were terrified. To them, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. The idea that there was a sign that they would see, something that they would resonate with, something that they would recognize. That they left what they were doing to go, and they did not go. The word let's conveys the idea that there was more than one, right? So let's go and see this thing. To see is to take hold of something, to have it be more than just in the mind's eye perhaps, but to actually have an experience of it. And so I think as we look at some of these pieces of the story that jump out, we can ask ourselves, well, what does that mean about our own journey? And let me take a sidebar here for just a moment. I encourage any of you who are interested in the idea of metaphysics and metaphysical interpretation to pick a story such as this one and kind of ponder it yourself. Move away from, did it happen literally the way it's described or not? Move away from that. Move away from what I say it might mean or what others have said to you it might mean. And you sit with it. And you ask of yourself, well, what is that like in my life? What is it like to be keeping watch over something at night? What does it mean to pay attention to a sign? What does it mean to feel the feeling of fear, but also have within you the feeling to not be afraid, or something inside of you that says to not be afraid? Does that make sense what I'm saying here? Because that's where, to me, whether it's the Bible or any other sacred text, that's where it becomes personal. That's where it becomes helpful. That's where it becomes real and meaningful to you and what's going on in your life. So here are a few things I've pulled out, and maybe that will spark an interest in you to go do some of your own thinking about this as well. So first, I pull out the idea that responding to the divine call, because I think this birth story is a story of the divine call within us. Responding to the divine call, you have to pay attention to what you're paying attention to. You have to pay attention to what you're paying attention to. That's really, really important. Have you ever gone through a few hours in your day and then kind of woke up and found yourself, what was I doing? What was I thinking? Have any of you had that experience? It's almost like a part of us is on automatic pilot, and then we catch ourselves. It's as if our spiritual self or soul comes back awake, and we go, oh, wait a minute, here's where I am. This is what I need to be doing. This is what, anybody relate to that? Sure. This idea, the shepherds out in their field at night, keeping watch over their flock at night, paying attention to what mattered to them. Think about it for a moment. Their sheep were like their financial portfolio. Really, I mean, it was their wealth. It was their livelihood. So they were not just taking care of them during the daytime, but paying attention during the nighttime. Why might that be important? All sorts of things can come sneaking in at nighttime, really paying attention, protecting what they valued, aware of what they valued. What is it that you value? What deserves your highest and best attention? I think it's things such as your consciousness. What kind of attitude do you have? What kind of belief system do you live within? What is the predominant energy of your thinking? Can you stay awake to that? keeping watch over their flock at night. That probably was not a very easy job to do, to stay awake. You may recall the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing what was about to befall him, what we call the Easter story, knowing the crucifixion that was about to befall him. And he was in the Garden of Gethsemane praying, and he has his 3 favorite disciples. He says, stay, wait, pray for me, watch. And what did they do? They fell asleep. Here we have the shepherds, ordinary kind of folk, keeping watch over their flock at night. A lot of what we emphasize in metaphysics, in New Thought, in unity, in the science of mind, is to pay attention to our thinking. And not only to pay attention to it, but to choose it. To choose it. To practice deliberately thinking a certain way. Deliberately thinking along the lines of what it is you want to be experiencing. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, said that the body is a slowed down version of thought. This was like 150 years ago. The body is a slowed down version of thought. I would add to it that our predominant life circumstances is a slowed down version of our thought. Our thought guides our decisions guide our actions bring into manifestation the lives that we are living. Do we control everything? No, we don't. But we certainly, through the power of the thoughts we choose to think, shape an awful lot of our lives. And unfortunately, oftentimes what happens is we are thinking by default, not by choice. To keep watch over their flock at night, to keep vigilant over our thinking as best we can, is to choose our thinking. It is not to fall prey to default thinking or automatic thinking. So that's one of the pieces I pull. A second is responding to the call. We acknowledge our fear, but we're moved by faith. We acknowledge our fear, but we're moved by faith. Have you ever had to make a really important decision that you were afraid about, and you felt the fear, but there was also something within you that seemed to tell you it was going to be okay, and that you just needed, what is that quote that I ended with? Sometimes your only available transportation is a leap of faith, right? Where you go, okay, I feel nervous. I have some fear about this. I don't know how it's all going to work out. I'm not sure I have all of the answers just yet. Yeah, I've got some fear. And right alongside that fear is something else inside of me saying, don't be afraid, something good is about to happen. Nod your head if you know what I'm talking about. Right? Right? I think we need to support one another more and more in that way of living and being. And that's part of what our prayer ministry does, our prayer partners do, is to help us not ignore when we're afraid, but to make sure that we're keeping that fear in its proper context. There is fear that keeps us from danger that we absolutely want to pay attention to. But I think too many, we're good at that. I think too many of us pay attention to the kind of fear about what could go wrong instead of paying attention to what could go right. What could go right? The angel said, do not fear, I bring you good news. We don't deny the fear, we acknowledge it, we lean into it. New ways of being, new ways of thinking, new opportunities in our life will almost certainly bring about a certain element of, if not fear, anxiety or worry, because we just haven't been there yet, right? We don't fully know what it's going to be like or feel like. Reverend Ellen Davenport writes this about the shepherd. She says, the shepherds are abiding in fields of darkness, unaware, but faithful enough to leave their valuable sheep to seek the child. something in your consciousness prompts you to seek spiritual awareness, to heed the angels and journey out of darkness. I think about this idea of journeying out of darkness. I think about this idea of bringing to light in our life those places where we have allowed ourselves to dwell in darkness. Sometimes the darkness is unresolved pain or trauma or hurt that we have suppressed, that we need to gently bring to the light so we can heal it and move forward. Sometimes what resides in the darkness are aspects of our being that we are ashamed of or have discounted, that we need to bring into light and to heal that as well. Sometimes what resides in the darkness are just false beliefs. Beliefs like you're not any good, beliefs like somehow you were born wrong, beliefs that somehow you were born in original sin, which is not true of any one of us. We are born in the image and after the likeness of God, of a spirit born in original blessing. But many of us, I think, still have lingering in the darkness beliefs and doubts and fears that need to be brought into the light. And when we bring it into the light, we see it more clearly. We're empowered to know what to do with it. How many of you remember maybe as a child being afraid of the dark? And what was one of the things probably mom or dad or older brother or sister did for you? They probably said, let's turn on the light. There's nothing in here to be afraid of, right? We associate bringing in the light as a way of dispelling some of the things that we might be afraid of. Third idea, to respond to the call at all, you've got to be present to spirit. You got to be present to spirit. You don't send God's messages to voicemail. We got to be present. We got to pick up the phone, so to speak. There have been probably as many times that it's happened this way as not in my life, where I have prayed in earnest and meditated in earnest for guidance, wanting to receive it in the moment that I am in prayer, and not receiving it then, but receiving it somehow, a few hours later, a few days later, week or so later, where all of a sudden the answer is right there. Have to be available to it. If you are in prayer, here's a very practical way I think of looking at it. If you are in prayer about something, asking for guidance, asking for wisdom, asking for direction for something in your life, keep asking and keep praying. Pay attention, though, because it may not happen while you're sitting on your prayer mat, that answer, that flash of insight, that piece of the puzzle makes itself known to you. It might happen when you're doing something else. But while you're doing that something else, you always keep, some of you are nodding, you always keep part of yourself alert, right? If we're asking of divine wisdom, if we're asking of divine intelligence for guidance or support, don't you think it's pretty rude if we're not paying attention? It's like if I think it was Ouspensky who said the universe is response to request. So if we're putting out a request, and prayer oftentimes, is a request. It's a request for help, for answers, for guidance, for support. So we put it out there, but we'd better pay attention to it. We'd better pay attention to it. What's trying to get your attention in your life right now? When you get quiet and still, is there something that's kind of gnawing? Sounds negative, and I don't mean it in a negative way. Is there something nudging at your soul? Is there we sometimes call it in unity, divine discontent. Don't you love the way we word things? I love the way we word things in unity. Divine discontent, that's so much more palatable than discontent. But is there a place where there's some divine discontent going on in your life? Therein lies an opportunity for your birth story. In that discontent, the discontent doesn't usually feel real good, But just because it doesn't feel real good does not mean it's not hiding something really, really good, like the angel saying to the shepherds in the story. Don't be afraid. There's good news here. There's good news here. Fourth, on the spiritual path, you'll often be given signs that you're on the right path. But again, we have to pay attention, right? We have to pay attention. We're often given signs that we're on the right path. The shepherds were told, this will be a sign to you. You'll find a babe wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger, and they did. Do we know that for a fact? No, I don't know that we can prove that. But the idea, I think it's an archetypical idea here, that we are given signs that will help us, signposts along the way, that will help us know if we're kind of moving in the right direction or if we need to make an adjustment here or there. I'm reminded of two stories, one of my own in just a time of great, great worry and fear when we were trying to put together everything to be able to get this building, purchase this building, long time ago, really just in deep worry, deep fear that nothing was going to happen. And I remember driving home from work with John. The church was in Mission Valley at the time in a small rented facility. And I was probably just doing a lot of venting of worry and fear. And I remember blurting out to John, I just need a sign. And as soon as I said, I looked up and there was a bumper sticker right in front of me, no fear. God speaks to me in very basic ways. No angel coming down from heaven. Bumper sticker, no fear. I have a friend, and some of you may know her. She was a ministerial classmate of mine. We were back at ministerial school at the same time, overlapping years. Her name, Edwin Gaines, known in our unity movement for some powerful prosperity teachings. And she tells this story of needing to make a really important decision. I can't remember now whether to accept a certain ministerial position or not, but it had to do with ministry and it had to do with a big decision. And she too was just feeling like she needed a sign. She just didn't know what to do. And she's out driving. I think she's talking to her husband at the time as well. I just need a sign. And in a way that only Edwin Gaines, and if you've ever met her, you know what I'm talking about, could say. She said, well, if Moses had a burning bush, by golly, I want a burning bush as my sign. What do you think she saw within just a few moments driving on the freeway but a billboard for a restaurant by the name of Burning Bush? Coincidence? You can call it whatever you want to call it. But I would say that was a sign. And last, responding to the call, it helps to have a few companions to keep you company. It helps to have a few companions to keep you company. We're told in this story, let's go and see for ourselves this thing. Let's go. Let's means it's not just me, it's me and at least one other. Let's go and see. Let's go. Let's see. How important it is, I think, to have spiritual companionship in our own journey. There are all kinds of relationships we have in life. There are all kinds of friendships we have. We have friendships and relationships that are based primarily maybe on interest or time of life. We have friends because our kids know one another's kids, or we have friends because we play pickleball together, or we have friends because we like some of the same kinds of things. And then there are those friends that are our spiritual companions, our cheerleaders, if you will, those who are on the sidelines or right there with us, encouraging us, much like the angels were told to the shepherds, fear not, there's good news I'm bringing you. Those companions that can help us to see the possibilities for ourselves when maybe our eyesight is getting just a little dim and we need someone else to remind us. So I've shared with you some of what I pull when I read the part of the Christmas story of the shepherds. And I really encourage you to kind of take a story that you've always been curious about maybe, and just look at it and ask of yourself, what do you think the characters mean? What might they be teaching you or saying to you about your life that could be meaningful and helpful? Because you have the same divine wisdom in you that I have in me, that the person next to you has in them. Namaste.